So one of the biggest differences with Borderlands 4 is going to be its weapons, its weapon manufacturers, and its weapon parts, in a system that's harkening back to Borderlands 1, and a system that I think is actually going to make the game much more interesting as a whole and allow you to just grind out some of those ultra rare items that everybody talks about from certain drops from Borderlands 1 and Borderlands 2. And I think the best place to start off is the 8 different manufacturers we're getting with Borderlands 4, and that includes 3 completely new ones, but this actually isn't the only manufacturers that are going to be in the game, as we'll go over when we get into the licensed weapons parts system. So starting off, we have Jacobs. Jacobs black powder firearms pack some mean critical damage ricochets and can unload bullets in a flash, perfect for sharpshooters with twitchy trigger fingers. So it's going to be Jacobs like you always know, and it's going to have the system from Borderlands 3 where you hit a headshot and it ricochets bullets. And we do also know there's going to be the possibility to get certain items that allow you to ricochet bullets off not critical hits. So I definitely think there's going to be some Jacobs focused build really early on in Borderlands 4. They're going to be pretty crazy. And then we have one of my personal favorites in Maliwan. Burn, freeze, and shock anyone who gets in your way with the elemental damage of Maliwan's high-tech weapons, withering your enemies with damage over time effects. And we do also know Maliwan are going to be able to have elemental switches, so you'll be able to get Maliwan weapons with different elements on them, so you can just switch the element on the weapon and completely change that weapon's element whenever you want to. And it seems like there may be the possibility of having more than 2 elements on a Maliwan weapon. So maybe in the end game or something, you'll be able to get like Maliwan weapons with like 4 different elements you can switch between, which would be pretty crazy as well. Then we have Vlad. With their high rate of fire and huge magazines, Vlad rifles can shred your enemies to pieces, but all that firepower comes at a cost of reduced accuracy and heavier handling. So these are just the really big machine guns with crazy amounts of ammo. If you never want to stop shooting, you're going to be using Vlad. And then we have TDR. After you've emptied the clip of a TDR weapon, toss your spent gun like a grenade, then get right back to firing as a fully loaded replica digi-structs into your hands. And we do also know we're getting the return of guns with legs from Borderlands 3. You'll be able to get some TDRs where you throw them out, they don't explode. You just spawn a little gun minion with legs that runs around and shoots things. And if you can find a really strong weapon with that, and you can have a build to keep the ammo up for that, that could definitely have the potential to be super strong builds, especially with the new licensed weapon part system. And then for the final returning manufacturer, we have Torg. When explosions are the only answer, turn the opposition into a smoldering crater with Torg launchers, packing heavy-duty explosive rounds that can switch to sticky projectiles. Everybody knows what Torg is. Everybody loves Torg. Every weapon is just some type of explosion, whether it's just launchers or it's sticky projectiles that you build up on somebody and blow them all up at a time. And then we have the 3 new manufacturers for Borderlands 4, starting with the Order, which also seems to be the main enemy faction. Use the advanced arsenal of the Timekeeper's Order army against him, loading extra ammo into high-powered bursts to eliminate targets with precision accuracy. So they just kind of explain this as it's like these charge-up burst weapons where you always charge them and then you let off this burst. And there is the possibility for some crazy one-shot weapons with something like this, where you're just bursting out a bunch of rounds at once, but you have that kind of charge up time. So there's very much a possibility that people are going to be making one-shot builds with some Order weapons. And then we have the Ripper manufacturer, which seems to be kind of the main psycho manufacturer of Borderlands 4, but good things come to those who wait, especially when it comes to Ripper guns, which need a moment to spin up before blasting at full auto for as long as you can hold the trigger. So it seems they are all going to be wind-up weapons that are pretty much all fully automatic, a lot of them probably having really large magazines. And weapon manufacturers like this, in my opinion, are usually kind of hit or miss because they have kind of a weird function that, in my opinion, doesn't usually feel as good as other weapons. But then finally, we have Doautilus. Easy to use, reliable, and quick to reload. Doautilus guns run the gamut from fully auto assault rifles and shotguns to burst fire pistols and SMGs with the ability to use multiple ammo types. So Doautilus really seems to be the jack of all trade weapons weapons, they don't necessarily seem to be like lower quality or kind of like a psycho manufacturer, because the weapon they're actually showing on the website looks really high quality, but their kind of main special function of this manufacturer is you can switch to different ammo types using the same weapon without having like launchers and the bigger weapons. I'm not exactly sure how that's going to work, but there may definitely be the possibility that you use one Doautilus weapon and you don't really want to use other weapons, so you can switch between those different ammo types. Not exactly sure if that's going to change like damage values or anything else of the weapon. So those are the 8 weapon manufacturers we'll be getting on the launch of Borderlands 4, but the really big change is the license parts system. And this system essentially means that you can get a weapon with a bunch of different manufacturer parts on it that changes up how different parts of that weapon perform, or even just gives it completely different properties. Like they showed off a Vlad weapon with a Hyperion shield on it, with a Maliwan weapon on it, and a Torg magazine on it, so it presumably would be having Hyperion shielding when you aim down sights. Its projectiles have an element from the Maliwan part, and then you're shooting explosives from the Torg part, and it's a Vlad weapon, so it would still have really large magazines that you could shoot for a long time. And this is just a start, because as you get higher and higher rarities, you can get more and more parts randomly rolled on your weapon, obviously going up to legendaries. So you'll have these legendaries with these special effects already on them that can then roll tons of different manufacturer parts to completely change up how different aspects of that weapon actually works. And this is even going to play back into the new enhancement mod gear piece, which is replacing artifacts from previous Borderlands games. And this essentially is a mod that focuses on one weapon manufacturer or a manufacturer's weapon part. So you could get one that allows any weapon with a Jacobs part on it to have a chance to ricochet rounds when hitting non-crits. So there's going to be such a ridiculous amount of build creation and weapon variation just based off of this singular system, but that's actually not all. Because you may have noticed that going over the weapon that they showcased with all of the different manufacturer parts on it, that it actually had a Hyperion shield. And Hyperion isn't a weapon manufacturer in Borderlands 4. So why can we get licensed part from Hyperion, but not a Hyperion weapon? And this makes me actually think that there are going to be a lot of licensed parts from other manufacturers that we can't get as like full weapons, but we can get parts of them on weapons, or their effects have just been tied into other weapons, because we did see on a Maliwan weapon that they could switch elements really easily, and that's something that's kind of inspired by Doll. We also do know there's going to be under barrel attachments for different weapons that are inspired by other manufacturers as well. I would not even be surprised if we get the Atlas manufacturer effect from like an Atlas part from Borderlands 3, where you can have smart bullets that lock onto enemies. I would not be surprised if we can get parts from pretty much any manufacturer from any other Borderlands game besides maybe Tiny Tina's Wonderlands. But this system will just allow for some of the most ridiculous weapon rolls possible. And we do also know that they're bringing the rarity back with Borderlands 4, so trying to find, say, legendaries is going to be much more rare than something like Borderlands 3, where they dropped everywhere. Now, that may end up becoming an issue depending on other systems that are in Borderlands 4. Now, we haven't heard of pretty much any of the endgame yet, so there may be systems like this, and I'm going to be doing another video going over my ideas with this. But if items are much more rare, legendaries are much more rare, and we have this kind of very randomized elements of these licensed manufacturer parts, that it may be really hard to get the role you're actually searching for. So I am hoping there is at least some type of crafting system or something that allows you to target something or change parts a bit more easily for Borderlands 4. So we're not all trying to get weapons that have like a 1 in 5,000 chance of dropping. But outside of that potential issue with the farm being way too long, I am very excited for the system. As I mentioned, it's kind of reminiscent of Borderlands 1, but I really just like this randomized element of these weapons, just having all of these different possible manufacturer parts, and then that tying back into other gear pieces we're getting in Borderlands 4. So there's just going to be so much build creation and so many crazy possibilities when you get some really cool rolls, especially once you get some really cool rolls of legendary weapons. So I'm very excited for the system, and this just makes me want to grind Borderlands 4 more when it comes out. But that's all I want to go over, so thanks for watching.